Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Prepared by Fire podcast. This is episode number 8. So today I'm super stoked. Like I always say, my guests are amazing. And this man has changed my life. He has been a mentor of mine. And he's believed in me when I hardly believed in myself. And a lot of people wrote me off. So I want to welcome Division Chief Tim Moody. He's a 26-year veteran with Marion County Fire Rescue. He currently holds the rank of Division Chief on B shift. He's a member of Task Force 8, Florida Smoke Diver, and he's been a long time instructor and has poured into individuals that the fire service has had, and he really believes that everybody is leading someone, and it's up to us to lead everybody well. So, Tim, welcome on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. So I'm really excited for this episode because I get to interview one of my mentors, and that's amazing. So I want to dive into the first thing that I feel you'll bring these guests and the most value, and that's leadership. What is your take on leadership, and how has it transformed over your career?
Early in my career, I didn't really think much about leadership. You go to the station, you hang out, you do the things that you're told to do, but you don't really. Or I didn't really take an active role in it, I guess I should say. Even when I promoted to lieutenant, like I knew I was in charge of this crew, but like the actual leadership as a concept really didn't hit me until I'd been a lieutenant for a few years. And now looking back, I realized what a crucial role the leaders, the people who were actually leading well in my life, had been. So I think it's a invaluable thing. I think it's the leadership that an organization has or doesn't have is going to be the success or the failure of that organization. And I've got friends that are outside the fire department that are in other industries, and it's the same with them. Their business fails or succeeds based off of their leadership.
So what is your definition of leadership?
Definition of leadership. That's a broad topic. So, but what I really think it is it's helping people achieve things that they didn't think they could achieve on their own.
How does that start with you?
So one of my mentors, Bobby Ramage, he's a deputy chief down in the Villages Fire Rescue now, but he was a battalion chief with us, and he was the one that really that got me going, that got me started down that path. He was kind of like you were saying in the intro. He was the one that believed in me when I wasn't even so sure myself that I was doing the right thing. So he kind of, it was his example, his personal example, just the way he carried himself, the way he acted, the way he would jump in and help, like all those things. Like I watched him do those things, and when I finally got to a realization that, hey, I need to step up and be a leader, he was my go-to guy that I said, okay, this is the guy I want to be like. And I took something from a lot of different people, right, but he was probably the main player in it.
He was the initial, I want to be like that guy.
Right. And, when I started in the fire department, like I didn't plan on being, leadership wasn't, like I said, it wasn't really on my radar. Being a chief officer or, way high up in the ranks wasn't really on my radar. Like I just wanted to show up to work and be a good fireman. Right. And it's being around people that are setting a great example is what kind of changed my mind on some of that stuff.
Yeah, so I want to roll into your upbringing. You were obviously raised, in my eyes, amazingly. I mean, your mom and dad fucking did a phenomenal job, and that's let's talk about people who don't have that upbringing and how to seek people that you do want to be like and seek that mentorship. Your upbringing, what was that standard? I know it was very high. It wasn't a slouch standard. There wasn't much room for nonsense. So let's talk about that.
Sure. So I was raised in a household where, you say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, sir. I mean, you cleaned your room, you helped out around the house, you did those kind of things. I don't, by no means was it like a perfect upbringing, and people that face difficulties, sometimes they'll look at somebody else and they'll say, oh, well, if they had it as hard as I had it, then they would be different. But I don't think that's the case, because one of the things I don't talk a lot about is that in my early teens, actually pre-teens, my biological father basically bailed on us, and took off. And I just I don't talk about that a whole lot. But that was hard. As a kid, you're like, what did we do? What did I do? What can I do to fix this? Now, fortunately, my mother remarried, and the guy who I call dad is actually my stepdad, and he was an amazing guy, and absolutely unbelievable family man. He's the guy that taught me to be a man. Like, this is what men do, and this is how you take care of your family, and this is how you provide, and that's so he was from a family standpoint, he was my first mentor, basically.
Right. Yeah, I love it. And, I think people that were raised right were raised with expectations.
Sure.
I think when you were raised with expectations, when you grow up into an adult, you now have expectations for yourself, how your life is supposed to be, and what your future holds, right? The expectation of where I want to be, what I want to do, who I want to be with, and the people I want to surround myself with. And the people that don't have expectations growing up, it's a shock when you become an adult, because now you're just floating around, and it's super unfortunate. And anybody listening to this that is lost, that doesn't really know their way, because the audience for this podcast is very broad. It's from new firefighters, veteran firefighters, firefighters in training, and not everybody has those people that guide them, has those mentors that are like, hey, this is how it's supposed to be. This is what you should do. These are the mistakes I made, and this is what you need to do to avoid those things, and for your trajectory to be a lot farther than mine. And I think people that don't have that, the first thing I would recommend is, first and foremost, set goals for yourself, and don't let anybody or anything compromise those goals. What advice would you give to people who don't have that role model or that person?
So your description of floating around in life, like that's a great description, because that's what happens if you don't have a goal. It's like a ship lost at sea. If you don't have a port that you're heading to, then you're literally just floating around. So I like that description of it. But yeah, as far as mentors, like, if you don't have somebody in your life that's stepping up and do that, seek them out. Go seek out a mentor. There's somebody in your life, a family member, a neighbor, a coworker, a friend's dad, whoever it is, like, seek that person out and sit down and talk to them. Because if they're the kind of person you believe they are, they'll be more than happy to sit down with you and talk to you and help coach you through things. I think taking an active role, so you're not floating around, and finding a mentor is important too, because some people don't realize, like, hey, this guy needs a mentor because he doesn't have anybody else in his life.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny how the driven people always are up and coming to find people that they want to be like, want to be better than, and they're like, hey, like, help me. What do you think? Would you mind guiding me along the way? And I think the people that aren't as aggressive kind of feel that you're putting a burden on somebody, or that they don't really care. And what I've come to realize is the greatest people in the world want to help everybody else become great. Right? They're not just selfishly like, on this path of wanting to be a great officer, a great firefighter, a great chief, a great person, man, woman, doesn't matter. I believe that those people, their ultimate calling is to help others become great, right? Like, they invested in themselves. Okay, now what can I do to help other people? So from here, I want to talk about how do you go from basically high school to, we didn't really talk about the Marines, and then into the fire service. How was your transition, and what made you, what told you, like, I want to be a fireman?
So honestly, it was, when I was a little kid, I was, you see the fire trucks go down the road and you're like, man, that's awesome. And you go to the firehouse on a field trip or whatever, and it was just cool to hang out with those guys. And then I kind of got out of touch with that a little bit and started thinking, well, maybe I'll do this or that. I was thinking some other things, to do in life. I actually went to college a little while to be an athletic trainer. Realized that wasn't really for me, because they just stand on the sidelines and watch the athletes work. They don't really get to go out and do a whole lot. So I realized I wanted something more where I was more involved in the action. I was actually working as a lifeguard part-time at the water park, and the guys in the office that we would go in, the medics that were in the office, I talked to those guys, and they were always super cool. And come to find out, they were all firefighters. They were just doing this as their part-time job. David Tozo. I don't know if you remember him, but he was one of the guys there. And he was telling me, he's like, yeah, this is my part-time job. I'm a firefighter full-time. And I was like, man, that's awesome. He's like, you should come by the firehouse. So I went down to the firehouse one day, hung out with him. I was like, man, this is awesome. And so I got into the volunteer class that Marion County was putting on at the time, became a firefighter, and the rest is kind of history on that.
And how old were you when this all happened?
I was 20, I think, when I started.
Okay.
Heading down that path, into the volunteer part and all. I would think I was in my 20s, maybe 21. I can't remember exactly, but
now I know this is I don't know if it's touchy subject, but when did you go to the Marines boot camp? Was that before or after?
So that was after. I actually started with the fire department. I've been with the fire department a couple of years, and then September 11th happened. And like a lot of people, I wasn't special in that aspect. There was a lot of people that went down to the recruiter the day after. And so actually the recruiter's office was packed the day after, but went down there, talked to him. I was already set on the Marine Corps. My stepdad, or like I said, the guy I called dad, he was in the Marines, and he always told me he had got drafted into Vietnam. And he'd always told me it was the best and the worst thing that ever happened to him. It was the best. The Marine Corps was the best thing that ever happened. He loved it. He really enjoyed it. He said he did not like being in Vietnam, though. So he didn't really care for being shot at too much. But yeah, and like I said, he was such a great man. I'm like, well, I want to be like him. So I joined the Marine Corps.
That's awesome. So you go to the Marines. You are how old? 20, 21?
Yeah, somewhere around there, 20, 24. Actually, I think I turned 25 in boot camp.
Okay. Did you think, before you got there, what was your thought process? Like, did you think, because I know you're an alpha dude, did you think you were tough? Did you think, like, what was your mindset going into that?
I had already had a lot of heads up from dad and from some buddies that had been in. So I already kind of had a heads up, like, just keep your head down, do what they tell you to do it fast, and and try and stay out of trouble, which that doesn't matter. They find you, when you're in boot camp, they'll find you, everybody gets theirs.
And how was it? How was your experience?
It was great. Honestly, the Marine Corps taught me a lot about leadership. It taught me a lot about physical fitness, about being able to do things, even when you're fatigued, even when you're tired, when you're sleep deprived, like you can still push beyond. So I learned a lot in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. And was it hard for you, or was it?
Oh yeah, no. I think it's hard for everybody at some point. I mean, you miss family, or you're like, man, I'm hungry. I wish I could get a little bit more chow or whatever. Like in talking about in the boot camp aspect of it. So that's for me. I would say it was hard. I would say everybody has their issues, but there again, people that have had a hard life and had a rough upbringing and wasn't sure where the next meal was coming from. The Marine Corps was probably a great thing, or any boot camp for that matter, because the next meal's coming real soon. So it's or you're going to get a certain amount of sleep or whatever the case. So again, everybody's experience is different.
Yeah. And what was the standard day one when you got there?
So I mean, you follow the rules, and they, when you. So again, boot camp specific. I'm not talking about once you're out of that, but they, you do everything the same as a team. That's why they shave your head. That's why they take all your possessions. They take everything, and they give you, these are the underwear you're going to wear. These are the pants you're going to wear. This is the blouse you're going to wear. I mean, like, they give you everything because you're now part of a team. You're not an individual anymore. You are part of this team, and this team is going to succeed or this team is going to fail. It's up to you guys working together.
That's awesome. And did you come into that with that same mindset, or did you kind of adopt that team mindset because it was just drilled in your fucking skull from?
Right. Well, yeah. Everybody adopts it at some point. But for me, I always enjoyed team sports. I was always the team sport player. Like, so for me, it was kind of easy. I would say people that are like play individual sports and stuff like that, it might have been a little bit tougher to kind of get used to that. Like my son is a individual sport player. He does jiu-jitsu and wrestling and things like that. But then when he found volleyball, like, all of a sudden he figured out the team aspect of it. So he plays competitive volleyball now.
So what exactly happened? You got out of basic training, you got out of boot camp, and then you went out to the fleet, and then what happened?
So I joined up. I signed up. I was in the reserves. Went checked in at my unit in Jacksonville, and then at that point, that unit wasn't activated or anything. So it was just doing this normal drill stuff. So I went back to the fire department and went back to work. and was just waiting for them to call us up.
Okay, and then so you get called and you start training in San Diego, right? You went out to
Mm-hmm.
college, and
Yep.
what basically what I want to get at is what stopped you from completing your time in the Marines?
Oh, okay. I got you. So, excuse me. So what happened with me is we got back out to Camp Pendleton, where I had done my school. My MOS was amphibious assault, so you would Amtracks, amphibious tractors. So got out there, started doing that, started doing some training. I actually fell off of the tractor. It got moved while I was up on top of it doing some work. Fell off of it, injured my back. Struggled for quite a while trying to make it through, but I was really slowing down everybody else at everything else because they were trying to help me drag my weight too. So got taken to the hospital. They said, "Hey, sorry, you can't deploy," and that was hard. So so everybody else deployed, and I did not get to. Came home, started seeing my personal physician. Ended up having to have surgery. Was in kind of limbo for a couple years between, after I had the surgery, whether the Marine Corps wanted to keep me or not. And then finally they discharged me out because there were so many people flooding in at that time. That was early in the war. There were so many people flooding in at that point, and they didn't need somebody that was that had surgery and had rods in their back that were kind of, basically kind of compromised a little bit. So that was actually devastating to me. Because again, being a team player, being in the team sports, when you see the team going on, and going out and being part of the bigger picture, and you're sitting on the sidelines again, like that crushed me. That started me down a pretty dark path for a while.
Yeah, so I can only imagine you come back, you're fucking crushed. Like you wanted to serve the country, you wanted to deploy and fight against what had just happened on our soil, and that's taken from you. And I mean, as far as becoming a firefighter, you need a healthy body. That's probably more taxing, I think, from the standpoint of operating as a firefighter than in the military. Just because you're wearing an air pack, you're wearing bunker gear, your range of motion is restricted. So how did you get through that dark point in your life and say, I'm not going to let this affect me. It's not going to deter me from being a great firefighter. Obviously, coming up in the ranks as a great lieutenant, now a great chief, because you could have went the other way and just your life could have been nothing. Just blaming it on the injury, where most people do let that cop out, let that obstacle ruin them. How did you stay above floating? What was your mindset?
So I wasn't floating very well initially. I was kind of sinking. So, I did like a lot of firefighters do. And, cause I was struggling back at work, I felt like I was compromised, once after the surgery, trying to get back healthy again, all that stuff. So, I did unfortunately what a lot of firefighters do. And I started drinking too much. I was not taking care of myself. I was not being intentional in my marriage and trying to be a good team player in my marriage. I got a little self-centered. Actually, I got a lot self-centered and was only kind of looking out for me. And man, it was a pretty dark time in my life. Just trying to get back. But you asked what I did, and I have to give credit to my wife, Mary. It was her doing, her keeping me going, keeping me moving forward. And eventually, I don't know exactly what it was, but eventually I realized, like, hey, I've been ruining a lot of things in my life that are really good. I've been not being an intentional husband. I've been not being an intentional father. I've been not being intentionally specific with my career. I just, again, back to that floating around kind of thing we were talking about. I was doing a lot of that. And finally I said, I'm not going to be like this. I'm going to, either I need to step out of the picture completely, or I need to be better at all these things. So,
right. That's amazing. So and I want everybody to understand that it's that simple. Like people overcomplicate things. It's a simple decision you have to make. Once you make that decision, you don't look back. You step forward, and everything behind you crumbles. And there's no going back. Like you make a decision, and you go completely forward, or you just stay in the rear the rest of your life. So from that standpoint, what kind of catapults you to striving to be a great firefighter, training every shift. For my guests don't know, this man that's on this podcast is one of the most motivated, driven, inspirational dudes that I know. So what catapults you from there to just getting after it and being the savage servant that you are?
Well, I think we're all a sum of our experiences and the people that are around us, the people who have coached us and mentored us coming up. And like I said, once I had that revelation, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to be like this anymore. I have to fix this. Fortunately, I had always been so or better, a little at least keeping my physical fitness up. I knew that was important. That was probably one of the things that helped keep me on the rails, besides, like I said, specifically my wife. But once I made that decision, I said, okay, well, I'm going to be a better firefighter. So that means studying more. That means attending conferences. That means expanding beyond this little bubble of my engine company that I was on. So I started looking broader. Started physical fitness is super important. So every day there was some type of workout going on, either at home or at the station. Started reading a lot of books on more than just that. I started reading books about being a better husband, about being a better father. Started reading a lot of books about finance and being better and more intentional with my money. And like I said, just decided I'm all in. I'm going to work on all these things, and I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to die trying.
Right. Yeah, and that's the mindset you have to have. So we fast forward, and I want to talk about how you got promoted into an environment, because your environment really tests your resolve, it tests your leadership, and it tests your patience. And it shows who you really are, right? Everybody's a great leader or a great firefighter under the spotlight. But what happens at 2 a.m. when you're tired? What happens when you have a flu? Like, when you're sick, when you're down and out? Your true character is revealed when we are, I believe, fatigued or put in an environment that's not intended for us to thrive. So you get promoted, and I know this personal story because I know you. You go to a station that's not as motivated as the stations you were usually a part of. And let's talk about that. What was that shock to you of like, these guys are not my guys?
Yeah. So, that was a big culture change for me. So, up to that, like I said, at that point, I was trying to be more intentional. So I was on our technical rescue team. I was at a station that was one of our 2 technical rescue stations. So all the guys I was around were motivated, and they were in the game, and everybody's playing hard. And I was like, man, this is awesome. I was watching our lieutenant at the time and what a great job he was doing. Recently retired Scotty Ramage. He was just a phenomenal leader for our crew. And I was like, all right, man, I think I owe it to him to try and go to another station and be like him and bring the things that he brought to us, to other stations. So promoted, which was crazy because the day I promoted, I was driving north up to that station, and I'm riding up there. And then I all of a sudden realized, like, I don't think I know enough things. I don't think I know enough stuff. I don't think I'm smart. Like, what did I get myself into? So I was almost a little panicked on the way up there. Got up to the station, and it was a completely different environment, way more laid back. Good people. Like I said, I don't mean this to sound like they're not good people, and wanted to help, but just, it was a different environment. Like, guys weren't doing gear workouts. Guys weren't out training every day, or a lot of things that I was accustomed to weren't happening up there. And so I said, hey guys, this is the standard I believe in. When we sat down and did expectations, this is the standard I believe in, and when we step outside this door, we're going to be in the proper uniform, and we're going to look the part. Our trucks are going to be squared away. We're going to train. We're going to clean the station. We're going to do all these, because it was an old station and nobody really cared about it. But I'm like, we're going to clean it. It's our station, so we're going to work on that. And it was funny because I've never forced anybody to come work out. I've never said, hey, we're going to do a gear workout today, or whatever the case may be. Like, yes, we train, but I've always left PT on the individual. And so I would go out and I would do gear workouts, and I was the only one out there, and they would stand there looking at me like I was crazy, but go do the gear workouts. And then after a couple of weeks of that, there was another dude out there with me doing a gear workout. And after we did that for a couple months, there was another dude out there doing gear workouts. And so it's just that kind of lead by example, just like, here's obviously you set the standard, you set the expectations right up front. But then you start to realize, like, if you're leading in other aspects, people will start to follow your lead, if you're setting a good example.
Right. And so you didn't hang out there for too long. The driven guys always find their way back to their environment.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times when we get put in these environments that aren't suited or reflect our mindset, our perspective on the fire service and in life. And when you get put in these situations, like he just said, lead yourself, right? Show people what the expectation, what the standard's supposed to be, and that they will get on board eventually. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, they'll never be completely on board to the point that you're happy, and that's okay. You know what I mean? I think as leaders, as driven people, it's our job to not expect them to be us, but expect them to be better because we're around them.
Sure. Well, and I tell you, it's funny too, because one of the new guys on that crew, there was a couple of new guys and a couple more seasoned guys. Be careful too when you're around people and what you're doing, because you never know where their career is going to take them. And one of the guys that was my tailboard firefighter on that crew is now a deputy chief. He actually outranks me now. So, and just a quick side story on that, if you don't mind. But I made one of the leadership mistakes at one point where I was a new lieutenant, and he came in and asked me a question, and I gave him the horrible answer of, "I'm the lieutenant, that's why." And that's just a terrible. As soon as the words exited my mouth, I wish I could have grabbed him and brought him back. I was just a terrible answer. And I actually mentioned that to him the other day. If he remembered that, he doesn't even remember it. But that was one of my regrets, of saying something like that. I've never said anything like that again, but it was funny. Drew Rogers is his name. And he actually ended up being my boss in training. He was a division chief when I was coming up as a captain. He took over the training department, so I worked for him for a couple of years. He's a phenomenal boss, great leader, and recently he promoted to. I promoted up to division chief, so we were the same rank, and then just recently he's promoted to deputy chief.
So there's two sides of that I want to talk about and get your perspective. What do you think from his perspective? Like, let's say I'm a newer guy and a leader that I'm listening to is insecure, doesn't have good communication skills, and does come out with, "Hey, do this because I'm the officer or because I said so." What do you recommend that person do? And then what's your thought process on being that leader? And like I said, working on your communication skills so that your tribe of people, your men and women understand where you're coming from. But there's a time and place for everything. Like if there were certain calls we did stuff on, and when you told me to do something, I wasn't like, "Well, why?" Like, I was just like, "Yes, sir, I did it." And then most of the time, if I didn't understand it, I would come back and ask you. But what's your perspective on that?
So from the firefighter perspective, and the reason why I regretted it when I said it is because I've been on the receiving end of that before, and I realized that's just a terrible answer. Like, if you can't articulate why you want somebody to do something, is it something they should really be doing? It's kind of one of those. Like if you can't explain it better than that, then maybe it's something we need to reevaluate if that's something that's going on. So I would say to the guys out there that are told just to do something, "Hey, I'm the lieutenant," that I don't want to say they're a bad person, but maybe they don't have the leadership skills that they need. So I would say comply, do whatever they're telling you to do, but keep that in your back pocket when it's time for you to promote up and you to be the leader, or you're in charge of the crew. Like, keep that in mind. Like, don't be the guy that says stuff like that. Have a reason for the things you're doing, because we learn something from everybody we encounter. And sometimes it's what we're supposed to do, and sometimes it's things we shouldn't do. So, from the young firefighter perspective, do what they're telling you to do, but keep that in mind. And certainly if it's an emergency thing and where there's not time to explain, obviously comply. But even if it's at the station, comply first, and then we'll have a discussion later. From the leader perspective, again, like I said, if that's your go-to, on how to get things done around the station, then maybe you need to reevaluate what you're doing, how you're dealing with your crew, how you're handling your people, because that's just a That's just not a good way to lead, with your rank. You'll get compliance, but you're just a manager at that point. You're not a leader.
Right.
Your people are going to do what they tell you to do because they respect your title. They're not going to do it because they believe that you believe in the mission and that you're looking out for their best interest.
Yeah, there's no trust. And the biggest thing with leadership, and I think why you have force multiplied so many people in your career, in your life, is there's always been that trust, right? Like people trust you. And as far as me and everybody that has worked for you, the perspective has been, we don't want to let you down. We love you so much. We believe in you and we trust you. So everything that we do is out of like, we want to do the best for you so that not only you look good, but we look good as a unit. And
that's a two-way street. If you got a good leader, that's a two-way street, because I never wanted to let you guys down either. I wanted to be the best I could possibly be for you guys. And that's a two-way street when you've got that kind of respect and, and care and concern and love for each other.
Right. But I think that's ultimately starts with you setting the expectation. Like, hey guys, this is what I remember. There was a certain individual, we talked about him the other day. It's so crazy. That wanted to come work for you, right? And this individual was overweight, was not somebody who had very high expectations, if any at all. Mm-hmm. And he asked you, "Hey, can I come work with you?" And your reply, what was your reply? I know you remember what we talked about.
So it sounds kind of mean, but he's extremely overweight, and he said, "You don't have any fat guys on your crew. I should come work for you. You don't have any fat guys in your crew." And I said, "Well, if you come on my crew, we still won't, because we're gonna correct that." And I didn't mean that in a mean way. I meant it because I'm concerned about him. I want him to be healthy. I want him to be in shape. I want it, because I don't want him to retire from this job and die of a heart attack the next year. I want him to have a long, healthy life and enjoy his kids and enjoy his family. So yeah, just let him know this is the standard. This is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing these workouts. We're going to be doing this training. We're going to be doing hard things. And he ultimately decided not to put in that transfer request.
And I want to follow up with that. That was 8 years ago, 7, something crazy, a long time ago. Yeah. And fast forward, certain individuals still struggling. So guys, make a decision. If you want to be surrounded by guys that are somebody you admire, want to be like, don't let anything stop you. I think being scared that you're going to be exposed, and that word is very toxic, I believe, but it's honest. You have to be exposed. You got to expose yourself to the reality of what's real, right? Are you out of shape? Okay, cool. We've accepted you're out of shape. Are you overweight? We've accepted you're overweight. Now let's create a plan and change it. It's that simple. I think hiding behind I'll just wait until I get put in a situation where my fitness is exposed, or my clothes don't fit, and every year I got to get bigger bunker gear, and this is a real thing for people. Instead of that, to me, that's so hard, right? And I want to talk about doing hard things. You got to choose your hard, guys. You can either be in control of your hard, or just let life be hard, and you have no control. So I want to talk to you, Chief, about doing hard things and how we as a crew did so many hard things and how we got so close in such a little amount of time.
So I would say the number one team building thing that you can do with your crew is to do hard things. And that's, hard trainings, it's hard incidents. And obviously we can't produce the incidents. The 911 calls come in whenever they come in. But prepping for those, doing like just over the top, type training that it just seems like this can never happen. Well, good. If we're ready for something that could never happen, then that means when the thing that does pop up, the 911 call that does pop up, that does happen, it'll seem easy compared to what we've been training on. So I've always been a big believer in that. And, taking that mindset and applying that when I first became a lieutenant and started doing these types of trainings with the crews, like I didn't realize that my previous lieutenants, my previous mentors had been building our team by going out and doing these hard trainings, by doing the things we've been doing. And so then when I became a lieutenant and we started doing it, and I realized how close the team all of a sudden became, how close the crews became, I was like, oh, there's something to this. And so then that's just been kind of the go-to since then. So that is, in my opinion, that is the fastest way to build a team, because that shared hardship brings everybody together quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could go back right now to any time in my life, I would go back to all of us suffering out back at the not so famous operations up north.
Well,
But
that was that. It was nice because we had operations out back, so every type of prop, tool, piece of equipment that we could possibly want was there. So we were a little spoiled with that too.
we were, and it was cool, and it still amazes me today how everybody was about it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Even the guys that would come on the crew that were new and didn't have that mindset, they adopted it quickly because we all had it. You know, and it goes to show you like when everybody is doing something, it's easier to assimilate into that environment than if one person's doing it, you're kind of the outlier. And I think that's why you've developed so many leaders is you've empowered people to be the best they can be. And I want to talk about that. Where does that come from? Was that how you were raised up in the fire service of like, hey, I'm going to bestow this leadership on you. I'm going to give you this responsibility so that you can grow yourself. Where does that come from?
So I think looking back, I realized that a lot of the guys I worked for were doing that, and I didn't realize they were doing it. They were giving me a little bit more responsibility here, a little bit more there, tasking me with certain things around the station. You know, certain being proficient on this piece of equipment that wasn't really in my wheelhouse initially. So guys have been building me up over my career that I didn't even realize at the time. Um, and honestly, that's been one of those things that just once you start that cycle, once you start on that, you kind of stay on that. Like, okay, well, I know this thing, so now I want to work on the next thing. I want to get better at this next piece of equipment or this next procedure or whatever it is. And so you just keep working like that because everything in the firehouse is a competition. So the guy sitting next to you is trying to beat you at whatever, at putting on your air pack faster, or being better at extrication, or having more knowledge about the tools, or whatever the case may be. So part of it's that competition. I think is good. As I got older, and actually I was watching your podcast with Tiago, and he was saying about be the rescuer that could come rescue you, and I like that. And but one of the things I've been saying for the last several years that kind of popped into my head, actually pretty much since my son was born, but I would tell the new recruits or the new cadets that we have or whatever, I would tell them, like, close your eyes and think about the person that you love most in the world, like whoever that is, your child, your significant other, your mom, your dad, your brother, a good friend, whatever it is, whoever that person is. If that person's in danger, train to be the rescuer that can go get them. And I just think that if you keep that mindset your whole career, like, you're going to be fine. Like, if you live up to be that rescuer that can perform that task, then you're going to be good. And so that's just been kind of one of my driving things, just to be the rescuer that my son would need, or that my wife would need.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard understanding what it takes to be that person. What it takes to be that person is sacrifice, it's commitment, it's dedication, it's an all-in attitude to constantly strive to put yourself in situations where you are exposed to what you're capable of, and then growing from there. That's really hard in itself. Showing up every day and choosing to be better than to remain the same is hard. And ultimately, working on yourself is hard, right? And I think, over your career, I want to talk about that, how that's important. We can't get away from the fact that, yes, being a team player is huge. Yes, being a great firefighter on scene is important. But if you're not dialed in mentally within yourself, you're not an asset. You're a liability. So let's talk about that. Over your career, how have you maneuvered the traffic of not losing yourself? Because in this career, it's not hard to get away from that, closing your eyes and remembering, like, I need to be able to rescue this person that I love so dearly, and I need to be able to be that person every day.
Sure. We talk about not losing yourself. It's easy to get caught up on one aspect of life, like not realizing that there's more outside the fire department. There's other things going on in your life, and if you over focus on one thing, you're not focusing enough on something else. That's just the way it is. So, there was times in my career that I was so focused on being that rescuer, the one that's capable of rescuing my son, the one that's capable of rescuing my wife, that I wasn't being a good husband or a good dad because I wasn't focusing enough on that part. I was over focused on one thing. So I think balancing life is super important. The joke is anything that's worth doing is worth overdoing, but you can absolutely overdo some things. So, um, so I would say now I make it a priority. I make each major part of my life a priority. I make family time is one of my priorities. I make time for reading and self-education and making myself better. I make that a priority. I make physical fitness a priority. I make being a good firefighter a priority. I make being a good dad a priority. I make being a good husband a priority. Being a good friend. All those things, I work on those intentionally. So, so that if that means, listen to a podcast about it or reading a book or, whatever the case may be, I try to be very intentional in each aspect of my life. So that way I don't get too wrapped up on one thing and I start to let other things slide.
Right. And I want to ask you, what's your definition, picture perfect, of a firefighter? Like, what makes a good fireman? Like, if you say that's a good fireman, what is that? What is your definition?
Man, that is somebody that's a team player, somebody that is in it for more than themselves. That is somebody that is physically fit, that is technically capable. And that doesn't mean that, it has to be any over the top hazmat guy or over the top, tech rescue guy or anything like that. It's just somebody that is capable of, forcing a door, that's capable of stretching a line, that's capable of getting on air and getting their gear on in a timely manner. Somebody that is looking out for the person to their left and their right, somebody that's looking out for their probies, the people that are below them, and they're looking out for their boss that's above them. That to me is the perfect firefighter. And when I say looking out for them, I don't mean just on a call or just even at the station. I mean in life, that's trying to help them excel in their life. They're trying to help that probie not only get off probation, but manage their life a little bit better, because we're all kind of a soup sandwich when we start,
Right.
It's
start, but throughout the career,
Yeah. No, is that person that's just there. Like when you need them, they're there for whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a fire. I mean, obviously that's important, but they're there for, when your kid's born, they're there for when you get married. They're there for when you're going through hard times. They're not just there in the good times, they're there in the hard times. Right. And to me, that's a good firefighter. It's a well-rounded individual. It's not somebody that's, because we can all put a name and a face to the guy that's excellent on a fire scene, but can't get along with anybody at the station, or their family, their home life is a total wreck. We can all picture that person, or in my case, I was that person for a little while, but but that's not, to me, that's not a good firefighter. That's good at one aspect of being a firefighter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to transition into something special because you're an OG, and I want to talk about the smoke diver program with you, and people that aspire to be smoke divers and people that don't know what it is. Whenever I bring this topic up, their ears perch up, and I'll never disclose anything about the program because that's a disservice to the individual that wants to be challenged and the program in itself. But I will talk to individuals who are smoke divers about their experience and where they were in life and how that came about. Fortunately for my guest, the man that I'm talking to was a part of the pilot program. So let's talk about that, where you were in your career, and how much time you had to train for this program called Florida Smoke Divers.
Oh, man. So where was I? That was in 12. So I was 16 years into my career at that point.
How old are you?
I'm 47 now.
So how old were you then?
Oh, well, that was 10 years ago. So I was 37.
Okay, cool. So not young. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I felt young at the time.
Right.
But I'd heard about the program. The program, the OG program, the old smoke diver program, stopped right after I got hired with the department. It was one of those things I wanted to do back then, but like I said, the program got shut down before I had the opportunity to go to it. Just between getting hired, going to medic school, some requirements that I had for my job, I was like, well, once I get these requirements out of the way, then I'll go back. Well, the program shut down before I got that opportunity, so didn't get to go to that program. So just all right. Well, let me get back to work here. So I was doing that. Well, then all of a sudden the opportunity presented itself. Chad Belger called me up one day, and if you guys don't know who he is, you'll get to meet him hopefully one day, because he's one of those guys, like, you should have somebody like this in your life. He's been a huge inspiration for me. Even before the smoke diver program, he was one of those guys, like, when you're around him, like, you want to be a better person kind of deal. So I was teaching with him. He called me up one day. I was at the station. He said, hey, I would like for you to, we're going to start the smoke diver program back up. I'd like for you to be one of the instructors. And I said, dude, that's awesome. I said, but I didn't take the program. I wasn't part of the old program. And he says, I know, but we're kind of limited on how many instructors we have from the old program. He said, so we're kind of looking for some guys with military background, this and that. And he said, I think you'd be a good fit. I said, well, I really appreciate that. However, I just have a thing where I don't want to ever teach a class that I haven't at least been through. And he said, okay, well, you want to be in the class? I said, sure. And I said, well, when does it start? And he said, 21 days. I was like, okay, all right, I guess we're doing this. So 3 weeks I had to train. So obviously I had been, physical fitness has been important to me in my career. So I'd already done a workout that morning. So we were actually backing the engine back in. The driver was backing us back in when I hung up the phone. It's like, all right, well, I'm going to go do another gear workout. And so got outside, started doing it. Chad had given me some of the times that he was thinking that would be times for us, on the run and things like that. So I got out there and started doing it. Actually, probably about 2 weeks of training, with 1 week before class started. I was like, man, I don't know how this is going to go. So kind of thought about it, was keep doing the gear workouts. And finally I just came to the conclusion. I'm like, I'm going to go through this program, and either I'm going to leave with my chip in my hand, or I'm going to leave in an ambulance, like that's the only way this is going to go down. So went out there, did all the entry program and everything that we had to do, got into the class. Like everybody else, it was a huge shock to my system. Because you can work out, you can do hard workouts, but it's not the same intensity. You can't hit that same level of intensity with just you and a buddy, or you and a couple buddies, that you can when you're there, when it's a 1-to-1 instructor to student ratio. So so that was it was a shock to my system, but it was good. I loved every minute, man.
Yeah. So let's talk about a specific point in the program where you were doing an evolution, and I remember you telling me a story. And
oh yeah,
you missed. Let's talk about it. Go ahead. I'll let you talk about it.
So there was a drill, and like I said, I don't think there's really many secrets anymore. So I'll talk about this particular drill. There's nothing in the program that's really a secret. It's kind of out there now, but the drill was obviously, this is midweek, somewhere around there. We'd had a few days of the class already at this point, so everybody's already kind of starting off the day fatigued. But you go through and you do the PT, and that's one of the things a lot of people get focused on. Like the PT is important, but that's not the class. It's not a PT class. It's a firefighter class. The physical training that you do is to get you fatigued to go perform under fatigue. So a lot of people get kind of zeroed in on the physical fitness part of it, and that's important. But like I said, that's not what the class is about. But anyway, so we had done our morning PT. They took several of us over to some Connex boxes, which they had set up as a search room. And they put you in there, and they say, hey, find everything you can find in there, basically. So you go in, you start doing your search, and you come across like a gated Y. Okay. So you go search a little bit more, and you come across an axe or whatever piece of equipment they have in there. It's nothing like super tiny, but it's, not large stuff. So searching through, and about halfway through, I finish the search and get done with it, and come outside, and they bring you over to the table. You get your bottle of water, you're drinking your bottle of water, and they hand you a piece of paper, and they say, draw the layout of that building and the location of everything you found. It's like, okay. So it's kind of a memory drill. So I write out the layout of the building, write down every location, everything I found, slide it across to the instructor. He looks at it, and he says, I'm sorry, you missed something. You need to go back in. I was like, there's no way I missed something. So get my gear back on, get a fresh bottle, go back in, and crawling along. I'm doing the search, and as I'm about the midway point of the search, I sweep my hand out and found a halogen bar that I did not find in the previous time. And I remembered instantly on the first search, I was busy feeling sorry for myself. I was doing a search. My shoulders were on fire, and I remember just crawling for several feet without doing a proper search. I just remember crawling forward. I was just thinking, just get done with this. And I missed a 30-inch halogen bar. And man, I really started thinking about that. Like, it was just driving me crazy because that, a 30-inch Halligan bar, that's the size of a toddler. Like I just missed a toddler when I went through this, and I decided right then and there, I am never going to do a terrible search because I'm busy feeling sorry for myself. That was my big takeaway from smoke divers. And so I was laser focused on everything else after that, and not just in the class, but just in my career. I'm like, I'm not going to be a shitty fireman because I'm tired, or a shitty leader because I'm tired, or a shitty husband because I'm tired. I'm still going to stay focused on the things I got to stay focused on. So
Right.
that was my huge takeaway from smoke divers.
I love it. Thank you both for sharing that.
Yeah.
And what is your take on carrying the burden? Because this isn't a news flash. I think it's been put in a space where it's not a big deal to be a firefighter. I think it's like whatever. People are just like, come on, join the party, join the circus. And guys like you and me don't take this job lightly. Don't take the profession lightly. And we do have a very high standard of what it means to be a firefighter, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So, what is your take on carrying the burden? I want to talk about performing when you are tired, performing when things don't go your way, and still being that person that you're expected to be, no matter the circumstance, emotional state, or if the world's on fire. It doesn't really matter. So, what's your take on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, you have to. I mean, it's basically not an option. Like we have to do the things that we say we're here to do. Even when you're tired, you have to respond to that structure fire. Even when you're tired, you have to respond to Mrs. Smith, having abdominal pain or whatever, whatever's going on. I mean, that's what we've signed up to do. But I think that goes back to the earlier conversation. That's why it's important to do hard things in training, and it's important to do hard things as a team, because even when I'm slipping a little bit, my teammate that I've been training with all this time is going to boost me up and say, hey, bud, let's get going, get in gear, let's go. That's why it's important to be surrounded by a good, strong team and to do all those hard things together, because it makes those times when you are tired, it makes them seem not so bad.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's just you're not just going to magically rise to the occasion. Everybody says rise to the occasion. You don't rise to the occasion. You've heard the saying, you fall back on your training, and who you are in training, who you are at the station, and when you're practicing, that's who you're going to be when it's time to perform.
Absolutely. What's your take on the short notice of going to this class? And it obviously goes to show that it was a career span of training for it. I mean, people say, how long did you train for this class? Well, you got to train for 16 years, I believe. I think you had an advantage.
Right.
Now, was it specific for what you were going to do? No, but when it comes to experience in gear, you had the experience. When it comes to physical training, you had the physical training. And when it comes to the mindset, I think you also had the mindset from having those expectations your entire career. And I want that to be a lesson for people. The class is a test. People nowadays are I keep it simple. And people are like, oh, what? I'm like, it's just a class. I'm like, the 6-day class, and people are like, this guy's nuts. I'm like, you can't make this into something that it's not, And I tell them it's hard, it's challenging.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't train, you won't pass. That's a given. But it's just a class, and I think you had a career's worth of deciding I'm going to be the best firefighter I can be. I'm going to be the most fit person I can be, and I'm going to work on my mindset throughout doing hard things. Over 16 years to then show up for this class, I think you were in a good spot. Obviously, with the short notice, it was still tough. But what was your thought?
No, yeah, like I said, the class was tough. There's no doubt. Everybody that I was in class with, and I was in class with some studs. Everybody struggled at some point. I actually remember in the class, again, Chad Belger was the lead instructor for the class, but I remember at lunch one day, I was sitting out back eating my lunch, and he come walking around the corner, and he said, "Hey, are you all right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm sorry, I'm struggling so bad on this P. I was dead last on PT. Like I said, these guys were studs. Like every run, everything we did for PT, I was last on it. Not because I wanted to be, just because I couldn't keep up with these guys." And I told him, I said, "I'm sorry, I'm doing so poorly on the PT." And he looked me dead in the face, and he's like, "This is not a physical fitness class." He's like, "This is a firefighter skills class. You're doing great." And I was like, okay, and that was all the boost I needed to keep going, which, again, it's good to have people in your life that speak that life into you. So, yeah, it is about being a good firefighter. It's about training. And that's why I think coming right out of the academy might be hard for some people to go through. I'm not saying you can't. I mean, I've seen some guys do it, but I think coming right out of the academy without some level of experience might be tough. But then again, I don't know. I didn't do it right out of the academy. I had 16 years on the job before I got to go.
Right. So I want to talk about, you got less days ahead of you than you do behind you. And what's your perspective on every day going to work, and you got, I mean, they just changed they're about to change the retirement to 8 years. But I haven't talked to you about what your plan is, but what's your perspective with knowing that, like, you don't have much time left? I mean, in all honesty.
Sure. Yeah, and that's something you think about, because when you start, you think it's never going to end, and then when you get close to the end, you kind of wish you could go back to the start and do better at it. But I heard the other day Bill Gustin was talking about that you trade your youth for experience, and he was saying that he would trade that experience back for some youth, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I've got to sit down on a couple of his classes, and he's an interesting dude. I really like his perspective on things. But it's But no, he's 100% accurate with that. So you like I said, you think you're just not going to end, or you're never going to get close to the end. And now I'm looking at, if the drop extends out to 8 years, maybe 8 years or less, probably less. So, when I started, one of my goals was to leave the fire service better than I found it. Try and take what the other people that have come ahead of me, all the things that they've built up, and the great name that they've given the fire department, and try and not only just maintain that, but try and add to it. And that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I'm still focused on that goal, on trying to make sure that the people around me are better for me having been around, not worse. I mean, because nobody wants to be the person that's dragging everybody down. So, yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that the things are a little bit better, and certainly I can look at our organization, the history of our organization, and see that things have gotten a lot better, not just because of me, but because a lot of the people that I'm working with, and yeah, I can just keep focusing on and trying to hit those goals, trying to make the department better. I've enjoyed every rank that I've been at in the department. I've every position that I've been in, including the position I'm in now. I love doing it. It's different than what I was doing when I started, but it's still good, and it's still part of the team, and it's still pushing the mission forward and taking care of the citizens and doing all the things that we're supposed to do. So I think just push that and keep trying to leave that kind of legacy for other people. Like I said, I had guys like Bobby Ramage that showed me that before he retired, and I've tried to push it on. I'm trying to show it to other people before I retire.
Right. I love it, bro. So I got one more thing for you. What would you tell Tim Moody if you could tell him one thing when he first started, after your I don't even know how many years of experience you have, but you have a lot. After your years of experience at a very high level and doing it right and making a lot of mistakes and helping and forging some of the best firefighters that the fire service has in Florida, I believe truly. What would you tell that person?
I would say be more intentional with what you're doing. Don't just go floating through life. Be intentional at work. Be intentional with your career, where your career is going. Be intentional in your relationships with people. Be intentional as a husband, as a father, with your faith, with your finances. Be intentional in all those categories. Don't get so lopsided. Don't let yourself get as lopsided as you got, kind of deal. So I think that's the number one thing I would say. Other than that, I've been honestly lucky, and in some aspects, and I've been incredibly blessed in others. So I'm thankful for what I've had so far, and I'm still looking forward to the years that I got left.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you, and yeah, just pay attention. And it's so simple as that is pay attention. The little things matter. Don't ever, this is something that I've learned from my mistakes. Don't ever think that one thing is less important than another. If you're a part of it, it's important. If you're in front of it, it's important. Everything you do is important. And if you approach life with that mindset, nothing will ever slip, nothing will ever fall through the cracks. And anybody and everybody that you're associated with will get the best version of you because your thought process is they're in front of me, so they are important. They are everything that needs to be in front of me right now and I'm going to give them everything they deserve. So, Chief, I love you, man. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, man, thank you.
Hey, brother. I love you too, man. Thank you for having me on. It was exciting to get to talk with you again.
Of course.